Welcome everyone. My name is Yola and I'm the Street Law Team Leader. Today, my team will introduce you the topic of gender gap pay and employment law. Without further ado, I'm going to pass my voice to Moise and Warren. I hope you will enjoy this video.
Alright, so today we'll be talking about gender pay gap. And before we begin, I would just like to ask everybody a question. In the back of your head, I would like you listeners to ask yourself, what comes to mind when you hear the term gender pay gap? And secondly, do you think men and women get paid exactly the same for the exact same job that they do?
So what is gender pay gap? It's the difference between the average earnings of both men and women, and it's calculated as the difference between the average hourly earnings. So the difference between both genders results in women usually getting paid less than men. That's the entire gender pay gap concept.
Now we'll talk about some data. As you can see, the gender pay gap has been declining slowly in recent years. This would mean that men and women working in the same position are either being paid the same salary, or perhaps the difference is not as big as it used to be. Unfortunately, this is not really the case. If you examine the graph a bit more closely, you can see that for full-time employees, the graph is slowly moving back up. And this is shown in the research that during 2018, the gender pay gap was at 8.6%, and more recently in 2019, it stands at 8.9%. So although the number does not seem like a huge difference because it's only 0.3%, in society, it does make a huge difference because you can make the inference that gender pay gap is slowly going back up once again.
So a brief history of gender pay gap and how we came to it today. The breakthrough in the history of employment came when the first Equal Pay Act was passed in the 1970s, and it was passed to address the entire issue of equal pay, which is now amended as the Equal Pay Act of 2010. The entire point of it was to eradicate the issue of women receiving much lower than men for performing the same job, and it was therefore rendered a legal requirement for employers to pay the same amount by virtue of the act. It doesn't matter in any type of contractual term, whether it's basic pay, sick pay, overtime hours, etc., etc.
Alright, so let's begin a mini quiz just to get you guys thinking. Why do you think there is a gender pay gap? Is it because A, the industries that are dominated by women, such as nursing or childcare, attract lower wages? B, are women seen weaker than men? C, women are not given the same opportunities? And finally, D, there is discrimination and bias because one's gender and race during the hiring process and pay decisions. So I'll give you guys about 5 seconds to think it over, but of course, if you need more time, please feel free to pause the video and resume once you're ready. I hope you guys thought it over, but all answers are correct, and every single answer are actually examples of many reasons why there are gender pay gap.
So, on top of Moise's quiz is another one. Why do we want equal pay? Now, these options all look pretty correct, and it could be a trick question, it could not be. But just for the purposes of the quiz, what would it be? A, to get the right people in the job. B, to have a fair society where opportunities are equal. C, because women don't make enough. Or D, we really don't require pay. And the answer is B. Now, you could think because women don't make enough, it's true. You could think that we need the right people for the job, but the idea is that we want everyone to have a fair shot at employment, especially during times like this where there's mass unemployment, people are losing money, their lives and whatnot. So the idea for us to have a fair society is more than ever exaggerated in today's day. And this regurgitates my point I just made. Why do we want equal pay for fair societies, regardless of gender, so opportunities are equal for everyone? And we want no discrimination work based on gender, because it makes sense to have. It doesn't really make sense for two people who can do the same thing at the same efficiency, at the same level, to be making where one makes one more pay than the other. It doesn't really make sense.
Next, we'll be talking about some of the reasons for gender pay gap. Gender pay gap is an overlooked problematic reality which in its origins reflect the different social status held by women and men. It has long been the general assumption that senior jobs by default require long hours and constant availability, which therefore does not follow for flexibility or part-time availability. This, together with the social constructed pattern of men fulfilling these duties and women staying at home to support them, has meant that men are better placed to invest their energy exclusively into work and endure the long hours these jobs entail. It is therefore perhaps the inherent presumption that senior jobs must entail long hours and uninterrupted availability, which results in this gender influence disparity.
So this slide shows a picture of the different occupations in the UK, and we're comparing their hourly earnings in pounds, the gender pay gap, which is the percentage point change between the different earnings, and the change from 2018 to now. And as you can see, occupations such as managers, professional occupations, associate professionals, and skilled trade occupations all are above 10 points, with skilled trades having the biggest pay gap differentiation, and administrative and secretarial occupations, which are mainly women or female dominated, with the lowest. So you can see that the type of job, the type of occupation definitely plays a factor in the pay gap differential, and it hasn't really changed much in 2 years.
So how can we overcome this problem? From 2017, any organization that has more than 250 employees must publish reports and figures about their gender pay gap. This is good because it will expose any organizations or companies who seem to have a disparity in their gender pay gap reporting. Also, it is by law that employers are to treat men and women equally. This would include the pay they both get for the same job, aka the salary of both men and women should be equal. And finally, there's also the facility to report anything, including discrimination related to gender, at workplace. This would help us to see any trends related to why certain women are not being accepted for certain promotions.
So here's a short video on why women are paid less than men, and it encompasses the entire theme of the PowerPoint, and it'll explain more in depth of why this has been an issue and why it has been the case, and why we're trying to fix it. So a real application of the gender pay gap would be in 2018, where the Glasgow City Council agreed to pay upwards of £548 million to compensate for working women who were basically paid less than their male co-workers for the same degree of job, which goes back to the point of having two people who do the same thing at the same level, but one's making significantly higher pay, which is obviously unfair.
Another example of a real-world application is the recent case of Samira Ahmed and BBC 2020. Samira claimed that she was underpaid by £700,000 for hosting audience feedback show Newswatch, compared with Jeremy Vine's salary for Point of View. In the case, the burden of proof fell on the BBC to show that the difference did not amount to sex discrimination. And of course, they failed. In the end, Samira Ahmed won her claim, and she was due £700,000 as compensation by the BBC as a result of gender pay gap. Finally, to conclude, in my opinion, gender pay gap is an important topic that people should know because it illustrates the struggles that women are still facing in society today. The fact that there are many women in the same field position as men who are earning less is quite depressing. People need to realize that there are women out there who work just as hard as men in society, and they should be treated with equal pay.
The issue of gender pay gap is not just an issue concerning women, it's also a basic human rights issue. And until we fix these two issues, it will continue to perpetuate. We have rights and we are entitled to those.
Also, here are some opinions from our colleagues. My opinion is that gender pay gap is the result of the socio-economic and political intertwined realities which treat men differently on all of these levels. Until this disparity is treated, the gender pay gap will continue. That is by Noor and also Sahira, who mentions that both men and women have different roles but same rights. Men and women deserve equal pay for the same task or duty they undertake within a workplace.
Here's the opinion on one of our fellow colleagues, Justine. The gender pay gap holds women back, making it more challenging for women to support themselves and their families, especially for those women living in a single-income household where they are the sole provider. It is imperative that public policy adopt more forward-thinking and that we advocate for stronger laws to eliminate the gender gap disparity. Moreover, education on gender pay gap should be disseminated to not only women but men as well, who will also play a crucial role in eliminating the gaps. Some recommendations on this issue: I recommend to go watching the TED Talk by Joe Cribb and a podcast, Getting to Grips with the Gender Pay Gap, discussing pay parity and potential with Helen Reardon Bondo.
Further to that, you can also check out Carrie Gracie's book called Equal: How We Fix the Gender Pay Gap, as well as The Gender Pay Gap: Understanding the Numbers by Fatma Abdel-Rauf and Patricia Buller. And of course, if you want to learn a bit more about gender pay gap, feel free to check out the YouTube link posted on this slide.
Thank you everyone for listening. We would love to hear your feedback, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to write a message in one of our Instagram accounts. It might be Pro Bono, Street Law, or even my own legal account, Legally by Yola. Lastly, we prepared a list of sources that we used during this presentation, so if you would like to acquaint yourself with them, there is a full list. So one last time, thank you for listening. Warren, I think it's your time.
Oh my god, my mic was muted. Your mic's muted. Your mic's muted.
Okay, let's start from the beginning, sorry.
Yeah. Oh my god, my mic was muted the whole time.
Sorry.
Yeah, just, like,
Okay.
mute yourself and I'm gonna start from the beginning. Welcome everyone, my name's Yola and I'm the Street Law Team Leader.